presence of the jury, the defendant, and attorneys of record are present. Sir, I want to remind you you're still under oath. Mr. Fries, you may continue with your cross.
I have no further questions, Your Honor.
Okay. Any redirect, Mr. Brown?
Just a little, Judge. You had been asked on cross-examination concerning Dalton Jack. Do you recall that?
Yes.
Based upon your assignment of leads, information that you received back from any of those other officers that would have checked on Dalton Jack's alibi, did you receive any information that he was present in Brooklyn on July 18th, 2018 at or around 7:30 p.m.?
No.
Or, I'm sorry, 7:45 p.m.?
No.
Other than Dalton Jack, you were asked a number of questions concerning other men that you would have interviewed, or you would have had other law enforcement agents interview to see if they had any connection to Mollie Tibbetts. Is that true?
That's true, yes.
Some of those men would have been Wayne Cheney, Ron Pexa, Jackson Eichhorn, and others that have been raised here by Mr. Fries. Would that be true?
That's true.
All right. Were any of those men associated with a vehicle that was repeatedly seen in the vicinity of Mollie Tibbetts when she was jogging on July 18th of 2020 at about 7:45 p.m.?
No.
Were any of those men associated with a black Chevy Malibu with chromed mirrors, chromed handles, and a sporty spoke wheel? Anyone?
No.
Whenever you spoke to any of those men or had other agents speak to them, did any of them tell you that they encountered Mollie Tibbetts on 385th east of Brooklyn on July 18th of 2018?
No, they didn't.
Did you have information that Cristhian Rivera told Pamela Romero that he had done that?
Yes, Cristhian Rivera said he saw her, followed her out on the 385th.
Did any of the men that you talked to or had other agents talk to indicate that they were angry with Mollie Tibbetts on July 18th of 2018?
No.
Did Cristhian Rivera provide that type of information?
He did. He actually said he was not only angry with her, but he actually fought with her on 385th.
Did any of the men that you talked to, the same list of men, indicate that Mollie Tibbetts had threatened to call the police on them?
No, just Cristhian Rivera did.
Were you able to develop any evidence that any of the men raised here by Mr. Fries were angry with Mollie Tibbetts in any way?
No.
Were you able to develop any information from any of the men, including Dalton Jack, any information from any of those men that they made admissions that Mollie Tibbetts was in the trunk of their car?
No, just Cristhian Rivera is the only one that told us that.
And Agent Vileta, prior to August 21st of 2018 in the early morning hours, did you or anyone else in law enforcement know the whereabouts of Mollie Tibbetts?
No, we did not.
Did any of the other men that you interviewed indicate to you, as Cristhian Rivera did to Ms. Romero, that they brought you to the location?
No.
And whenever we say brought you to the location, what location is that?
Where Mollie Tibbetts' body was.
None of the other men told you that, correct?
Correct.
Did any of the other men that were interviewed in this case tell you how, or describe to you how Mollie Tibbetts would have been found?
No, just Cristhian Rivera did.
And that is that she was covered by corn stalks, correct?
Correct.
How was Mollie Tibbetts found in the field?
Covered with corn stalks.
Who provided you that information prior to you seeing her in the cornfield?
Cristhian Rivera did.
Any of the other men that you interviewed at all give you that type of information?
No.
One person in this case, is that right?
That's correct, yes.
That person is the man seated here to my right, Cristhian Rivera. Would you agree?
Yes.
Did you develop any other lead or find any other reason that Mollie Tibbetts' blood would have been connected to the vehicle exclusively driven by the defendant?
No.
Only the defendant, correct?
Correct. He told us that she would be in the trunk.
One person.
Right.
That's all. Thank you.
Mr. Freeze, any recross?
Yes, I'll try to calm things down here a little bit.
Okay?
Okay.
I won't yell at you, I promise.
Okay.
So we have this interrogation of Cristhian Bahena that was 11 hours long, right?
Yes.
That was recorded, right?
Yes.
And then we have this, well, at the scene where I think Mr. Brown just characterized it, that Cristhian Bahena said, "I brought you here," right? That was recorded on an in-car camera, right?
Yes.
What I find interesting, and please explain it to me, but we have no recording of from the sheriff's office to the scene, do we?
Judge, I'm going to object. Can we approach, please?
Yes.
The evidence that you have that Cristhian Bahena actually killed Mollie Tibbetts came from his mouth, right?
Well, there's physical evidence too, yes.
That puts the knife in his hand?
That puts her blood and DNA in his trunk of his car.
That puts her in the trunk. Agreed?
Yes.
Does it put him stabbing her?
No.
Okay, that's all I have.
Anything else with this witness, Mr. Brown?
Yes. The defendant does not admit to Pamela Romero as to how the injuries were inflicted on on Mollie Tibbetts, correct?
That is correct, yes.
He claims that he blacked out.
Yes, he did.
That was, as far as you know, his choice, correct?
Right, yes.
That's all.
Anything else, Mr. Freeze?
No, sir.
Okay. Thank you, sir. You may step down. State may call its next witness.
We're going to call Kevin Horan.
So go ahead and step right up here. I'll gauge you to raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm the testimony about here will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Okay. Let you make your way over there if you would, sir, and be seated.
Sorry, it's not very comfortable.
Yep.
All right.
You may proceed, Mr. Brown.
Thank you, Judge. Can you please state your name for the record?
It's Kevin Horan, Horan.
And how are you employed?
I'm a supervisory special agent with the FBI,
How long have you been a supervisory agent with the FBI?
25 years.
And what particular unit or division of the FBI do you supervise?
I'm assigned to the CAST team, which is the Cellular Analysis Survey Team. We're a group of agents and task force officers that are scattered throughout the United States. Essentially, we are subject matter experts in all things cell phones. So the forensic analysis of phones, the analysis of data that comes from the phones, as well as the live tracking of cell phones.
Okay, and you do you head up that CAST unit?
I'm the field supervisor for the Western United States, so I cover from Ohio to Hawaii.
Okay, and where do you live?
Dayton, Ohio.
And is that where you work out of?
That is correct.
What's your educational background?
I have a bachelor's degree from Syracuse University and a law degree from the University of Dayton.
Okay. Have you been a practicing attorney prior to your time with the FBI?
I was an assistant prosecutor in Dayton, Ohio for 4.5 years.
Prior to joining the FBI?
That's correct.
What other background do you have with the Federal Bureau of Investigation other than being a member of the CAST team?
For about 15 years, I was assigned to a Safe Streets Fugitive Squad in Columbus, Ohio, where I worked primarily fugitives, robberies, homicide cases. After that point in time, the FBI formed a specialized team known as CAST in 2010. That's when I was asked to join with 9 other people, became the original founding members of that team. From that point, we all received quite a bit of additional training in cellular technology that spanned months at a time throughout the course of 2010. There were some additional classes as well in reference to cellular tracking of phones. All in all, I've probably had an additional 200 hours of training in cell phones.
And have you testified in other states and other courtrooms concerning your expertise with the analysis and tracking of cellular phone data?
I have. I've testified, I believe, this is my 100th time. Happy anniversary to me. So 100 times.
And that's over a period of what year? How many years?
From 2010 to present in multiple states and federal and state courthouses.
So if you can, with regard to your expertise in the analysis of cell records, can you provide us a little bit more detail in what you can do whenever you approach an investigation, what type of assistance you can provide?
Sure. Essentially, when we get involved in an investigation, what the investigators want to know is what data can we obtain from a cellular service provider that may shed some light on what happened, who someone was talking to, who they were texting, making voice calls with, what have you. So our first order of business generally is to obtain those records. In this case, the cellular provider for Mollie Tibbetts was Sprint. So we obtained the records from Sprint. With those records, I can tell a lot of things. Essentially, when I look at a set of call detail records, is what they're known as, they tell a story. So they're all numbers and columns on an Excel spreadsheet, but essentially it's telling us a story about what someone is doing, who they like to talk to, where they like to go, how often they talk to someone, whether they like to text or whether they like to make voice calls, what have you. So we can then take that data, interpret it, and try to find not only witnesses and people to be interviewed, but also potentially the last known location of that cell phone.
Okay, hang on just 1 second. Before we move on, I'd like to approach the witness, please.
You may.
I'm going to show you what's been previously marked as State's Exhibit 94, and this is just for identification purposes. We have the exhibit uploaded. But what is this that I'm handing you as Exhibit 94?
This is my CV, which has all my experience, education, and whatnot.
Okay, some of that we've already summarized.
Correct, yep.
And is this an updated CV?
It is.
All right, and it accurately represents what your training and experience and education is as it relates to your job?
Yes.
We'd move 94 into evidence.
No objection.
It's already in,
Oh, I'm sorry.
so,
I just want to make sure we were identifying it correctly for the record, though.
okay.
Yeah. All right, thank you. So, Agent Horan, as part of your experience and duties as it relates to cell phones, we'll get to the specifics of this case here shortly, but in relation to cell phones and cell phone records, do you look at a historical record analysis?
Yes.
Okay, and can you just describe for us in some, summarize for us what a historical record analysis is?
Again, we would start with obtaining the records from the provider. We would analyze that information by utilizing specialized software that we have. Essentially, we take that data, we put it into our software, and the software will actually map it out for us. It will show us cell sites and sectors of those cell sites that the phone was in communication with when something happened. With those, with that information, we can create maps, and those maps become critical many times in cases where we're trying to pinpoint approximately where somebody was, let's say when a robbery occurred or a missing person, anything like that. That type of analysis is critical information.
All right. And did you bring that type of expertise to this particular case?
Yes.
When were you notified concerning the need for your assistance in the disappearance of Mollie Tibbetts?
I was aware that it had occurred. I had seen some information in the media that she was missing. I actually had reached out to the squad supervisor for the Omaha division, which covers Brooklyn, Iowa, and advised her that we could potentially bring some insight into the case, at which time I deployed to Brooklyn, Iowa. I believe it was Monday, I think it was the 23rd, so it was about a week later. I responded to the command post. I started working on the records that they did have, and also requested that additional data be obtained at that point in time.
Okay. And tell us again what the additional data that you needed in order to do your analysis.
So the initial set of records that were provided to me were the actual call detail records from Sprint. So that would have been all of Mollie's voice calls, text messages. There is an additional data set which had not been obtained at that time. It's known as per call measurement data, or PCMD. What that data is, it's an additional set of measurements that the network takes whenever something occurs that can tell us approximately how far away a cell phone is from a cell tower when those events are taking place. And it's very, very important to get that if we're trying to locate a cell phone.
Okay. So you've gotten these two types of data sets, is what you've described so far, is that correct?
Yes.
Is there any other type of data set that you would have collected that relates to the phone that was used by Mollie Tibbetts?
We will try to obtain anything additional to Sprint. So sometimes we will do what's known as a Google geofence. So if we're working with Google, we can get some information from them on locations of cell phones in and around a certain area. We can also collect advertising IDs that sometimes are put out by cell phones. There's a number of different data sets that we can obtain in addition to those that were provided by Sprint. But in this case, because I was focusing on Ms. Tibbetts' phone, I only needed what I could get from Sprint, because all of that other data probably wouldn't be relevant to her phone.
Okay. So at the time that you became involved in July 23rd, Mollie Tibbetts had not yet been located. Is that correct?
That's correct.
You were attempting to assist with to provide search areas where law enforcement could potentially search for her. Would that be true?
That's correct.
Do you remember the number associated with Mollie Tibbetts' account?
Unfortunately, I don't. I come across hundreds of numbers a day, and I can't memorize them all.
That's all right. I'll show you something here shortly that'll hopefully help refresh your memory. But it was, just to move on, it was your understanding that you were analyzing and looking at a phone number that was associated with Mollie Tibbetts.
Yes.
Okay. So, how long were you here in Iowa to assist with the investigation? What was the total amount of days? Do you remember?
I spent just about 7 days here, and after I left, we had another FBI agent followed my stay here for another week, and then we also had several agents assisting remotely.
Okay. And based upon the information provided to you, was there a specific time frame that you were asked to review?
Yes.
And what was that?
That would have been July 15th, and the time frame was, I believe it was around 8 p.m. In that range, which would have been, I think, the time that Ms. Tibbetts had gone out for a run.
I think you said maybe July 15th. July 18th of 2018 is the information that
Yes.
she was running. Was that the date?
That's correct, yes.
Okay. So that was the time frame that you're referring to?
Yes.
And tell us the times again that you were looking at.
I believe, well, essentially what I do is I take her records, and when I put it into the software, I just run it out to the very end. So, and then I start working backwards. So I was focusing on the time, the reference time I was given was when she actually was last seen, and that was on an actual run. My recollection was around 8 p.m.
Okay. Are you referring to the information provided by Christina Stewart, who actually saw Mollie Tibbetts running at a certain location?
That's correct.
And would that have associated Mollie Tibbetts with 385th in Powesheik County?
That's correct, yes.
And directionally, that would have been just east of Brooklyn, Iowa, correct?
Yes.
All right. So that's the area you were focusing on?
Yes.
All right. Were you able to locate a cell phone tower in the area that the phone of Mollie Tibbetts would have communicated with?
Yes.
All right. And exactly where was that? Did you create a visual to show others where that tower was located?
Yes.
All right. I'll show you on the screen here. It's already admitted. I'm going to show you what's been already previously, no, go back one. Previously introduced as Exhibit 88. You can have that on the screen. It's already admitted. Can we put it on the two big screens?
Not on here yet. It's blank.
should be. Judge, the exhibit is on our screen. I'm not sure why it's not. Is it on yours?
No.
No, it's not.
It's all connected like it has been before. I'm not sure what the problem is. May we approach, please?
It's up now, Mr. Brown.
Can we put it on the screen? It's already admitted. If we can get it on the bigger screen. There we go. Love technology. All right. Exhibit 88 that you can see here, Agent Horan, are you familiar with this particular slide?
Yes.
Can you please describe for the jury what we're seeing here in Exhibit 88?
So this is a typical map that we produce from the records when we get them. What you're seeing here, I'll start with the narrative at the top. So it's just essentially this is July 18th, 2018. Between 8:15 and 8:28 p.m., you have Sprint cell phone 641-510-1065. It utilized Sprint cell site 9, which is sector 1 of that tower, which is in Brooklyn, Iowa. How that actually is depicted on the map is you see this symbol on the page here that looks like an open, we call it an open wedge. Essentially, that's the one of 3 sectors on that cell tower. It's sector 1. It covers about 120 degrees of that 360-degree circle, and that's the side of the tower that the cell phone was communicating with during this period of time. Can I draw on this?
You cannot. I
Essentially,
wish you could, but you can't. So just before we go on, the phone number that you associated with Mollie Tibbetts is seen here on this slide, correct?
That's correct.
And that refreshes your memory as to the number that you had associated with Mollie Tibbetts and examined?
Yes.
Okay. So there's 2 other icons that are put on this map. Do you see one? Did you see those?
Yes.
The one on the left, or more into the center, is a gold house icon. What does that represent?
That's the house that Mollie was staying at and where she initiated her run that evening.
That's the information that you were provided?
Yes.
And then the green icon that we see a bit east of that, is that on 385th?
That's correct.
All right. And what point does that represent?
That's the location of a residence where an eyewitness had seen Mollie run by.
Okay. So basically, this gives us the area that you were looking at concerning how and when Mollie Tibbetts' phone would have communicated with the tower.
That's correct.
Okay. And did it provide you information concerning how and when her phone communicated with the tower?
It did. What it's telling me is that, at least in reference to this tower in this sector, that the phone is somewhere, anywhere really in Brooklyn, heading to the east, because it's communicating with that, like the northeast side of that tower. It's not on the west, it's not on the south, it's somewhere to the northeast. If this is all I had, I would not be able to tell much about the location of her phone. That's why we add in the per call measurement data.
Okay. And does that provide you time that her phone would have communicated with the tower?
Yes.
Okay. I'm going to show you what's been previously introduced as State's Exhibit 89. Is that what you're talking about? Does this slide here represent that?
Yes.
All right. If you could, please orient the jury with regard to the additional arcs that we see here on State's Exhibit 89.
So these arcs are the per call measurement data that I was talking about. How this is obtained is essentially it's like a stopwatch. If if your cell phone is communicating with a cell tower, the time it takes for your signal to go from your phone to the tower and back, if you had a stopwatch, based upon one simple formula, and that is the speed of light. Radio frequencies travel at the speed of light. If you had a stopwatch, the network can tell approximately how far away you are from the tower when that occurs. So these arcs, they're represented as arcs because we don't know exactly where, we just know the distance that the phone is. So starting with this one dark arc, which is between 8:15 and 8:19, there are actually multiple hits in that area. That's why it's darker than the others. So they're kind of pancaking on top of each other. So we see multiple hits at 8:15 to 8:19, and then 1 minute later we see another one that's a little bit farther to the east, northeast of where that previous one was, and then finally at 8:28 p.m. we see another arc that's a little bit farther out. So that's telling me a lot by looking at that as far as how the phone is moving, whether it's in motion or whether it's stationary or whatever might be happening with the phone. I can learn a lot from this information.
Okay, and with regard to whether or not the phone was moving or stationary, what does this particular information that we see that's represented on Exhibit 89 tell you with regard to the phone that is associated with Mollie Tibbetts?
The phone was clearly moving. It was moving in an easterly direction. From 8:15 to 8:28, we see the bands progressively move away from Brooklyn, Iowa.
Okay. Is there anything else of any significance with regard to the phone of Mollie Tibbetts that you haven't already testified to that's represented here on State's Exhibit 89?
No.
Okay. Let's move to, before we move to the next one, were you also provided information historically from the Fitbit records associated with Mollie Tibbetts?
Yes.
And what was of interest to you with regard to those Fitbit records concerning the directionality of Mollie Tibbetts' runs?
So we had a couple of known facts, if you will. We knew that she was on a run this particular evening when she apparently has or was wearing a Fitbit. A Fitbit will communicate with your cell phone, and it does that through an app. When you finish your run, essentially the user will tell the app you're done, and the phone will upload your map to Fitbit showing what your route was. In this case, Fitbit did not have her current route, so the route that she was running this particular evening they did not have because the user did not upload the map. So what we did is we referenced prior runs that Mollie had been on, and by looking at those, we were able to determine that this particular route was one that she had run before. And by overlaying that on this particular analysis here, we were able to determine that Mollie, in fact, was running about a 10-minute mile pace in an easterly direction based upon a map that she had essentially created before.
All right, so just to take us back a bit on the Fitbit records, the records that you reviewed, whenever Mollie would go on this particular route, how many miles would she run round trip?
I believe it was about 6 miles.
Okay. It was basically an out and back run, would you agree?
Yeah, with a little bit of loop through the town, yes.
Okay. And based upon the information that we see here, would those historical routes overlap with these particular arcs that we see in Exhibit 89?
Yes.
All right, let's go to Exhibit 90. Can you please describe State's Exhibit 90?
So this is just taking the red arrow indicates a previous run that Mollie had been on, and if we followed that particular route, essentially with the timing advance that we see here, the per call measurement data, we were able to determine that she was probably running about a 10-minute mile. In fact, was running perhaps the same exact route that she had run before.
All right. And just to make sure we understand that, whenever somebody is using their cell phone, the cell phone is on, does it constantly communicate with the nearest tower?
What was happening here is that Molly, because she was running the Fitbit, the Fitbit was actually receiving some information from this particular run, but not enough data to tell us really anything that had been going on. So that occurs through what's known as a data session. So a data session, all we can tell is that the phone is communicating with the network, which is why we have these arcs. And we don't know the content, though, of what's happening. We don't know whom the phone is communicating with. We just know it's going over the data side of the network. So your phone is broken up really into three parts. You have voice calls, you have text messages, and then you have data sessions. The data sessions are essentially the smart side of your cell phone, Google, Facebook, things like that.
All right, and you indicated earlier that the route that we have here between 8:15 and 8:28 would be consistent with a 10-minute mile running pace. Is that correct?
Yes, that's
and
correct.
Is that based upon the information that you received when the phone communicated with the tower?
Yes.
All right, and you have a calculation, I assume, that you used to arrive at that. Is that correct?
Yes.
All right. Without getting into the details of what the calculation are, it comes to about a 10-minute mile running pace.
That's correct.
All right. And is that an estimate?
It would be, yes.
Okay. All right. At some point after what we see here on Exhibit 90 and 8:28 p.m., were you able to determine if Mollie Tibbetts' phone again communicated with the tower that we saw or any other tower in Poweshiek County?
Yes. After 8:28 p.m., we see the cell phone depart essentially from this tower. It is now much farther south. I believe it's about 4, almost 5 miles away. And it is, the arcs are, actually they are coming from this tower, but on the southern side of the tower. So the sector 2 of that tower is measuring the phone traveling away from this scene.
All right, and in analyzing that data, are you able to come up with any estimation as to speed of travel of the cell phone?
Yes.
And what was that?
I believe there was varying rates of speeds. We had a number of hits that started at, I believe it was 8:35 all the way up to 8:53 p.m. As those arcs progressed, the speed, I believe, was around 60 miles an hour. And then at one point it slowed down. And when it slowed down, the arcs also slowed down. The arcs basically compressed into one area. They more or less banded in that one area up until 8:53, and then there was nothing else after that.
So is it accurate to say that after 8:28 p.m., Mollie's phone was traveling at over 60 miles per hour?
That's correct.
Headed in a southerly direction?
That's correct.
Are you able to pinpoint exactly where that phone would have been located when it was traveling at that speed and in that direction?
Not exactly, but when the phone slowed down, there were measurements off of several towers, and what we obtain from those types of measurements when they're coming from two different locations is oftentimes these arcs will intersect. They form an actual X on the map. And we've been extremely lucky finding people, things, evidence, whatnot, whenever we have that, because it's usually a very good indicator of where the device is or where the person is. That particular area where those intersecting arcs became now our search area.
Okay. And were you able to develop a visual for law enforcement that was working this case for the area where they should search based upon the cell information that you were provided?
I did, yes.
And were you also able to provide a visual for law enforcement concerning where or what area near Brooklyn that Mollie Tibbetts would have been abducted?
I did, yes.
All right, we're going to move to State's Exhibit 91.
Mr. Brown, let me jump in here.
Sure.
And indicate we need to break for lunch. Members of the jury, will be in recess till 1:15. Please leave your notebooks where they are. And I want to remind you on your admonition, please do not be discussing the case with anyone. Make sure you're not doing any type of independent research or having any type of media exposure. The hall has been cleared and you're free to go. And sir, you may step down.